Julie, I think we're ready.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Library Staff Training on Legal Information. I'm Julie Yoshikawa, head of the Social Science and Philosophy section at the Hawaii State Library. I'm introducing today's speakers since law is one of the subjects covered in the SSP section. Thank you to Danielle and Susan for arranging this webinar called Providing Legal Information When You're Not a Lawyer. Our speakers are two librarians from the Hawaii State Supreme Court Library. They will cover a lot of information and answer the questions that you submitted earlier. Please hold any additional questions until the end of the presentation. Let's welcome State Law Librarian Jenny Silbiger and Public Services Librarian Marlene Cuenco.
Thank you so much, Julie. Aloha, everyone. We're so happy to be here and spending time with you. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Okay, here we go. Yes. Okay, so I hope everyone can see my screen. I think we were practicing it, so it should work well. Yay. Okay, so again, my name is Jenny Silbiger. I'm the state law librarian, and I'm so grateful for Julie and Susan and Danielle for having us today so we can spend time with you. And I'm joined by my wonderful public services librarian, Marlene Cuenco. So let's just dive right into the presentation. When we're thinking about legal information and questions that come about the law, when they come in, it's useful to think about where people's exposure to the law comes from. And so unless you have been specifically involved in a case, a lot of the introduction to legal concepts come to us from mass media, and like even reality TV and procedurals and movies and famous films that use legal information as their plot device. But as you know, even in reality TV is not really reality. So there's a lot of difference between, so it's nice to know that your shared experience of a legal concepts, where that come from, right? Because those are shared media experiences. But when you are asked the question, what is the law? I mean, here's another media reference, right? And then that idea or that phrase you might have heard of is for the laws, there's laws that are written in stone. But are they really? And so when you're answering that question, what is the law? A lot of times the answer is it depends, because laws can change over time, right? And there aren't sometimes the easy answers. And if you think about, if you visualize, even in those films or a court proceeding, right? There's an issue at hand, a legal issue at hand, but then there's attorneys on either side arguing for it. So it can be a little squishy. So in the sense of our presentation here, I'm borrowing language from my Maryland colleagues who do similar work with public librarians from the law librarian perspective. So we're going to think about in our heads that law is language passed by government bodies that holds force over all parties in a particular jurisdiction. So before we really get into it, I thought I'd give us all, including ourselves, we need this pep talk too, a legal reference pep talk. Because number one, it's okay not to be an expert. I mean, that's not our job to be an expert. And number two, it's okay not to know off the top of your head the answer to immediate questions. Because if you think about it, even lawyers who go to law school, the quote unquote experts, they may only be experts in one particular avenue or one subject area of the law. Because navigating legal information can feel kind of crazy, right? The roadmap. So that's really where we embrace our roles as librarians, as navigators. Basically, we're here to help them, get into, navigate the sea of information that's out there. We can recommend books and resources. We can listen really intently to keywords to help them formulate their phrases. Okay. So in this presentation, we're going to describe the structure of government, because it really helps us as librarians understand the origin of legal information and how it's organized. So there's a connection on how the government is structured and finding the law or the legal information. We'll also include an overview of primary and secondary sources of law, because as librarians, we always like to organize our information, but it's helpful for us when we're looking for it. And also we'll discuss the legal reference interview, and we'll workshop your questions, which we really enjoyed, by the way. Thank you so much for submitting them. And then also sprinkled throughout, we'll have these legal resources at your fingertips, because those are also referral tools for you. And you have that handy dandy handout. So I have a little pop quiz for you, and you can feel free to use the chat. So here is a pop quiz, test your knowledge. Is it law? So you don't really have to answer. You can just do a thumbs up or do a fun little emoji. So the Hawaii Revised Statute, is it law? The Kauai County Code, is that law? I don't know if you can see the chat, or people are using their little windows and you can put a little heart or thumbs up. Kauai County Code, is that law? A Senate bill, is that considered law? The Hawaii Administrative Rules. Law for dummies. Okay, that's a gimme. We know that that's not a law, but by the way, I was checking your collections and you guys have law for dummies, which is helpful. Okay, Brown versus Board of Education. Is that law? That's a Supreme Court decision that desegregated schools. So I don't know, I can't see the emojis. I know on webinar you can see them come up, but anyway, I'll just let you know that everything on here is actually the law except for the Senate bill, which was a tricky one because Senate bills are draft laws, right? They propose laws, but that's not considered the law. And obviously law for dummies, it's not law. So when we think about legal information, it's important to think about this fundamental basis of structuring our government. So I have a picture up here of the US Constitution. I'm not sure if you went to see Hamilton while it was here or if seen Hamilton the film on Disney Plus, but it talks a lot about how our government was structured. We the people, and it organizes how the federal government is structured. Similarly, in 1840, King Kamehameha III promulgated the first constitution for the Kingdom of Hawaii in Lahaina. So you're looking at a picture of the Olelo Hawaii publication of the Constitution and laws, and then the translation that came out a year later, which we have in our collection in special archives. But this also set up the blueprint for the construction of the government for the Kingdom of Hawaii. So when you think about the branches of government, you know, Schoolhouse Rock, right? There's 3 branches of government: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial, but always think about that Constitution as the root of that structure. And it's important to think about these structures, the 3 branches, because that is where the origin of legal information comes from. So that you have the executive, a picture of the White House, the legislative, the Capitol, the judicial branch of the United States Supreme Court. And this is also carried out in our state level as well as county levels. So what do the branches do? So as you know, the legislature, we are embroiled in that legislative session right now. So the legislature creates the laws. So they introduce bills, if passed or signed by the executive, the president or the governor or the mayor, and they become acts. They're published chronologically in acts of the legislature. They're published by topic in the revised statutes. So the Hawaii Revised Statute, the US Code, our respective county codes. So they create the law. Then we have the executive agency or executive branch. What do? So they are tasked with carrying out, with enforcing the law. So they devise the regulations. They're published by the executive departments, like the Department of Land and Natural Resources, et cetera. So a quick and dirty description. So in 1975, the Endangered Species Act was passed by the Hawaii State Legislature, you know, to protect endangered species in coordination with the federal government. But anyway, so they passed this law. Okay, we got to protect the endangered species in Hawaii. Well, the Department of Land and Natural Resources are the ones who create and act rules to carry out that particular law. It's why if a tourist comes to Hawaii and they touch a sea turtle, they could be fined up to $2,500, right? That's the executive agency or executive branch carrying out the law. Or in 2021, there was this World Ocean Day, and the legislature passed all of these acts around, or passed all these laws around conservation, shark conservation, and David Ide signed them into law. So the legislature passed these laws to conserve, you know, to protect sharks. Well, then the DLNR had to enact the enforcement of fines and forfeiture and having to figure out how to determine if someone was actually poaching sharks or were they defending themselves, et cetera. So that kind of gives you that how those 2 branches work together. So then we have the 3rd branch of government, which is the judiciary, where Marlene and myself reside in the Supreme Court Law Library. And so the judiciary is tasked with interpreting the law, and they do so on civil matters and criminal matters. So just kind of going back to law and order, you know, you have a right to an attorney, or you have the right to remain silent. Those are all crimes, right? So the criminal aspect. And then everything that's not a crime is considered civil. So bankruptcy, divorce, custody matters, landlord-tenant disputes, those are in the civil realm. And then we have the trial court level and we have the appellate level. So in the trial court, the judges will make decisions on a dispute. They'll make judgments on orders or rule on motions. These are not usually published. And the really distinguished detail about trial courts is that the decisions apply to the parties in the room. And then if you don't like your decision and you have grounds for appeal, then you can go up to the appellate level. You appeal to the Supreme Court, right? You appeal to in our state, the Intermediate Court of Appeals, or you to the Hawaii Supreme Court. They also write opinions, they rule on motions, but their decisions, many of them are published. And the major difference here is it's not just applied to the parties in the room, but it applies to the entire jurisdiction. And so I just have a story that I will tell you a story because it incorporates, I would like to tell a story about how the laws can change over time and this whole idea about jurisdiction. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the journey of same-sex marriage and the evolution of same-sex marriage here in our state. So once upon a time in 1990, there were 3 same-sex couples who applied for marriage licenses in the state of Hawaii, and they were denied the licenses from the Department of Health. So they went to the trial court and they said, my rights are being infringed upon. Well, the judge said, I'm dismissing this. Okay, so dismiss, no, that's not what happened. I dismiss it. So then they appeal to the Supreme Court, right? Because now they can appeal to the Supreme Court. So then in 1993, then Justice Levinson ruled, oh yeah, that's discriminatory. And he remanded it back to the trial court. And that means go back to the trial court, fix this because they were discriminated upon. Well, that applied to the whole entire jurisdiction of Hawaii. So Hawaii became the first state in the nation to say, no, same-sex marriage bans are discriminatory, you know, saying the same-sex couples have the right to marry, first in the nation. Okay, that was jurisdiction. Well, the following year in 1994, the legislature, the other branch of government stepped in and they passed an act and they said, oh, no. So they defined the requirements to get a marriage license as for opposite sex couples only. And then in 1998, there was a constitutional amendment. I don't know if you remember that, but the Hawaii voters voted on the constitutional amendment, say defining marriage as for opposite sex couples. So no more gay marriage in Hawaii or same-sex marriage in Hawaii. Now, in the meantime, through time, the states on the mainland, some of them were passing resolutions or passing constitutional amendments. Some high courts were saying it's okay to have same-sex marriage. Some were saying, no, it's not. And then there was a slew of civil union bills, and that's what happened in Hawaii. So in 2011, there was a civil unions bill that basically gave same-sex couples the same legal rights as married couples. And that went into effect in 2012. And there was a bunch of that going on in the mainland as well. And then in 2013, the legislature convened, they passed the Marriage Equality Act of 2013, and then everybody could get married in Hawaii, hooray, okay? And by then, I think we were like the 10th or 12th state. And then a few years later, okay, so because there's still other states, they're saying, no, we ban it. Other states were like, yes, it's fine. And then the United States Supreme Court in 2015 ruled that bans on same-sex marriages were unconstitutional, and that became the law of the land, right? So all those states that said, no, they now have to follow what the United States Supreme Court decision was, which is banning same-sex marriage is unconstitutional, so everybody has the right to marriage. So this is also an example of law changing over time. But this explains, I just wanted to kind of talk about how, you know, the law changes over time. And also when we're generally speaking, experiencing legal information questions, it's really important to listen to where things are located, right? So things are different here in Hawaii, even from 1990 to now. So we want to know, we reside in our counties, our respective counties in Hawaii, then we reside in the state of Hawaii, and then the federal, the United States jurisdiction. It's also really important to hear about dates, right? Because life was a lot different 30, 40 years ago than they are now, especially for specific legal issues. And then this is just handy just to listen for keywords or phrases. You know, sometimes people ask about background checks. If you hear background check, that's usually about criminal charges or sometimes traffic charges, because commercial driver's license shouldn't have like misdemeanors on their record. And divorce custody, that's family matters. If you hear about my landlord or utilities or I'm locked out, that's landlord tenant. So this is my quick and dirty, like 3 branches of government where legal information comes from. And then there's another way that we organize our legal materials. And one is the primary, which is what we've been talking about: constitutions, statutes, regulations, county codes, case law. That is the law, the language of the law itself. And then we have everything else that's not the actual law, but it describes the law and helps us interpret it. So we have legal dictionaries, legal treatises, that's specific materials that are based on subject areas of the law, legal encyclopedias that talk about terms, restatements, law reviews. So it's helpful for us to think in our minds as librarians that there's the three branches of government, all the legal information that comes from them, but then also the organizational primary versus secondary legal resources. So typical legal reference questions that we get, and many law libraries and public libraries across the world, things about marriage, family matters, things about my landlord won't repair my something, or it won't return my security deposit, that's landlord tenant. Sometimes there's just people doing research like free speech or a legal concept like same-sex marriage, or you're doing research on a particular article you're working on. And then I don't know this, I thought this was unique to Hawaii, but I was wrong. That the chickens, my neighbor's chickens, are bugging me is not exclusive to Hawaii, to other counties as well. So when we're approached with these legal reference questions, it's important for us to think about using the same reference tools that we do for every reference interview. We want to be approachable. We want to show our interest. And I think the key here is listening and inquiring, like listening for those keywords, and then formulating the search terms and following up. So we all know how to do that because we're librarians. For specifically for legal questions, it's really important to identify your patron. Is this somebody that's representing themselves in court? And if so, that we call them pro se litigants. Usually they're a person in crisis if that's the state, and that's the case. Students or teachers doing research, or patrons who are just curious about a particular legal issue that came up. Or the type of question, I'm looking for the law on a particular topic, and that's when we're listening really hard. Or a known item, an example of a citation or a case or a statute. Sometimes we get calls like, I got this ticket, it says ROH, what does that even mean? And so we help them identify where they can find the revised ordinances of Honolulu. So here's just an example of a case citation, Littleton v. State. You've probably seen that in the news. The first party is the plaintiff, the v. State, the state is the defendant. This is the case number. The Supreme Court, where it's listed as the court has decided, the date, the volume, and the reporter, and the page number. So that's like an example of a case citation in Hawaii. Then we have the statute citations, which you may be familiar with. The state abbreviation, HRS, Hawaii Revised Statutes, the chapter number, the section number, and this will identify exactly where you're going to find this particular charge. The federal statutes have the same kind of codification, a title number, the United States Code, that's fancy symbol for section, and then the section number. So that's where you can actually pinpoint that particular citation in the code. So no citation, no problem, because that's where we use our listening skills. We're listening to all the information that the patron knows. We listen for those keywords and really use our skills to pull them out. And then sometimes I'll even tell you, I'm looking for a rule. I need a form or the law or the procedure. So I am going to turn it over now to really deep dive into the reference interview with my amazing colleague, Marlene Cuenco. So I'm going to stop sharing. She's going to share. I'm so excited. I can't wait and Marlene's going to talk more about the reference nitty gritties, and then we're going to deep dive into your questions. Okay, I'll be quiet. Marlene, you're on mute.
Yeah. So is my screen good? Everybody can see? Everything's good? Okay. So thanks, Jenny. I'll be going over some helpful tips and addressing concerns that may arise in the reference interaction for a legal matter, and introducing legal resources that you may not be familiar with. So a big component of legal reference is answering questions relating to court forms. And what you want to do as a librarian is let your patrons know that select court-approved legal forms are available via the Hawaii State Judiciary website. Show your patrons how to navigate legal websites. Let your patrons know of legal service groups that are available locally, or recommend books, manuals, encyclopedias, or other resources of legal information. And the goal in all of this is just to provide options to your patrons and allow them to make their own conclusions about the information. Did it go for?
No, click on your screen. Yeah, there.
Okay. So on the flip side, there are situations that you want to avoid so that you don't practice inadvertent, unauthorized practice of law. We'll talk about that later. But as mentioned in the previous slide, we do get a lot of questions about court forms. And a form will generally ask a patron for, or a person for their name, address, or contact information. And these are what we call known or factual items of information. And you can tell someone where to write that on a form. And this is going to be especially helpful for our patrons who may not speak English as their primary language, or they do read at a lower level. So, just to help them navigate through the court form and say, hey, this is where you write your name, this is where you would put your address. What you don't want to do is assist a person with a narrative portion of a court form. So if they need to write an explanation of why a certain action is being requested, the patron is going to have to formulate that statement on their own. So for patrons needing assistance with writing, I always suggest that they find a relative, friend, or acquaintance who can help them with that portion of the form. So as librarians, we never set out to intentionally practice law during the course of performing reference work. And in reality, librarians aren't going to be prosecuted for the unauthorized practice of law. So, there's no real fear there or concern that you should be worried about. The main intent behind these laws is to protect the public and less on prosecuting violators. So when unauthorized practice of law is defined as you're going to be prosecuted when it's someone who is intentionally violating the restrictions on who can practice law, or a person who portrays themselves as a legal expert in order to defraud someone. And professional liability is going to be where a person would sue someone, meaning an attorney, because they relied on their expert advice or service, and they did not receive effective assistance. So with all that being said, we do have real ethical concerns that we should be aware of and provide the best service we can without crossing boundaries. But our best defense is always going to be that we're experts on finding the information, but we're not experts on the information itself. So just some additional legal reference interview tips. There really isn't any difference when you're doing legal reference versus a general reference interaction. It just may seem a little bit trickier because often, like Jenny mentioned earlier, that when people are coming to us for legal information, they're often in the middle of a crisis. So as the pictures on the slideshow here show us, sometimes you might have the perfect resource, but for the imperfect question. Or I'm sure we've all come across that patron who provides you with a very lengthy but usually unnecessary background prior to them actually reaching their actual question. So whatever the situation might be, just remember, as you would not offer to diagnose a patron's medical condition, we're not going to try and attempt to diagnose or solve their legal issue. And some additional general tips: don't be shy about asking your patron a question in return. So oftentimes the person might not fully understand themselves what kind of legal information they actually need. So making that clarification or simply restating the question back to them goes a long way in getting a better understanding of their needs. And oftentimes patrons will approach you and have letters or materials, and that's what actually prompted their reference question. So look for clues in those materials. They could be case names, citations to state or county laws, form names, or even court rule names and numbers. So what you want to, so when you're doing legal, some additional tips. Providing reference service to self-represented litigants can be very challenging because, like we said, they're often at a very high stress level. So I find it helpful just to be calm and create a positive connection, because then it helps to de-escalate their anxiety. And then we can go ahead and try to break down their request into manageable tasks. So for example, they might need a combination of laws, court rules, and court forms. So that's a lot of information for somebody to be given. So try to present the resources and one component at a time and not overwhelm them with everything at once. And even then, when we're providing all this information, a patron might insist that we're just not giving them the information they think they need. And it's okay at that point to say, maybe you need to speak to someone who is a legal professional, because although we may disagree with how they're approaching their legal research, it's not for us to offer our thoughts and opinions on their personal choices. And what we want to avoid. So we should always avoid determining what the law means. So telling a person what they should do or what a legal document means. So try avoiding when they're asking you, just give me your opinion. We want to avoid those kinds of questions, because legal advice really is something that should be coming from an attorney whose opinion is based on their knowledge, skills, and training. Our objective is to point patrons toward relevant information and not provide our opinion about that information. And I do find it helpful to have key phrases ready, because it helps to establish boundaries and level of expectation on the patron's part. So at other times, we actually need to gently remind our patrons that we are in fact librarians and not attorneys or legal professionals. And just remember, it's not a sign of failure if you refer patrons elsewhere for assistance or you just can't help them, because sometimes we just don't have the resources or access to resources, or there's limits on our services. So now I'm going to actually start reviewing our library website a little bit, and then I'm going to review some online legal resources. So users can actually search for materials of the Hawaii State Law Library System directly from our homepage using the Kanawai online catalog search bar, which is our online catalog. And in addition to the Supreme Court Law Library here in Oahu, where Jenny and I are located, we do have satellite libraries across the state. So there are libraries on the islands of Hawaii and Maui, as well as Hilo and Kona on the Big Island. And our online catalog will actually help you find materials, and you can see what specific locations have the materials. And further up on the screen, you're going to see we do have a link to our virtual reference desk, as well as on the right-hand side there, a link to something called Ask a Librarian. So both of these are features where individuals can ask questions of the Supreme Court Law Library staff, because that's where they're going to be linking to, either over the phone or via email. And then we also do provide what we call real-time online chatting with our live chat service. And it's something we do Monday through Friday during our regular business hours. So from 7:45 to about 4:15 p.m. People are welcome to come and log on and chat with us online about their reference questions. And I would highly encourage all of you at some point to try out our live chat service. When you have a free moment, just log in and get a feel for how it operates, and don't hesitate to recommend the service to any of your patrons, because we have a staff member monitoring the service at any given time during the day. Now, sorry, did I skip a slide? Yes, I did. Okay. So our website also links to resources specific for self-represented litigants directly from the homepage. So this includes Hawaii-specific access to justice services and a listing of legal resources. I'm going to briefly review some of these services, but I won't be getting into much detail because that will be covered in our second session of this training that's going to be coming up in April, I believe. So we're going to leave all of the details for then. Now, when you're searching, there isn't a way for you to search or browse both the Hawaii Revised Statutes and the Hawaii Constitution through the Hawaii State Legislature's website. So there is a main search box at the upper right-hand portion of the page where you can select Hawaii Revised Statutes and do a search. And they also provide a link from their Laws and Research pull-down menu. And just note that if you search through either of these two methods, that you will be searching the current version of the Hawaii Revised Statutes. And just a side note, for the state constitution, it's going to be found in volume 1 of the Hawaii Revised Statutes. And I do want to make note, I know Jenny mentioned earlier about how laws change over time. So your patron may not necessarily want to look at the current version of the language. They might need something from a previous year or something a little bit older. So the legislature does have an archive, and it's also linked from their laws and research pull down menu. And their archives goes back to 1999. So there is that ability to search the laws back to that point in time. Prior to 1999, you will have to locate probably a hard copy source, which would probably be at one of your friendly law libraries on your island. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about legal forms. And online court forms are made available at the Hawaii State Judiciary website. Our forms are organized by location, so that would be the first, second, and third circuits, as well as form type, whether it be a family, district, or traffic-related form. And the page also includes statewide court forms, and those would be available for the appellate courts, agency appeals, and some other topics. And the forms, I want to note, are fillable PDF documents. So your patron could actually type in their information online, and then when they print out the forms, it's already filled out with everything they want to say on their form. Makes it a little bit easier. Also on the court forms page at the top portion there, you're going to see that there is a link to a free interactive forms website. And what that link will do is it'll take you to this website. And it's an interactive civil legal forms website, which is actually maintained by the Legal Aid Society of Hawaii. So it operates similar to TurboTax. A user can begin an online question and answer interview. And at the end of the session, the website will generate court forms that can be filed in our Hawaii courts. And in addition to forms, legal informational brochures, videos on topics related to family, housing, and other civil legal problems or issues are made available. And the site also links to our users to access to justice organizations that provide civil legal services on a variety of topics. On our library website, we also have a subject guides pull down menu, because as a result of getting the same questions over the years, our staff here at the Supreme Court Law Library has actually gathered the information that we find and put together what we call our subject guides. And it brings together resources, whether it be online or in print hard copy in our collection, but just a really handy tool for people to walk away with, and they'll just have all the information on a particular topic at the ready and they can refer to it. Another Hawaii-specific online legal tool that is available for free is the Find Law website that provides user-friendly summaries of Hawaii law with citations or links to relevant sections of the Hawaii Revised Statutes. We also have self-help centers, which are located in Hawaii courts statewide, where we have volunteer attorneys provide legal information and in some cases, actual legal advice, and it's all for free to the public. And this includes what we call CASURE, or our Kapolei Access to Justice service. And that is offered through the First Circuit Family Court and actually hosted by the Supreme Court Law Library via Zoom. That's Jenny. And Free Legal Answers is another online resource. It provides a virtual advice clinic for qualifying civil legal questions, and an individual will need to answer a few questions to determine if they qualify for the service. Microsoft, in partnership with the Legal Aid Society of Hawaii, has created an online legal navigator portal that will screen legal questions regarding divorce and family court temporary restraining orders. And the service will provide a list of resources and steps to take. And I think we verified with them that they're slowly planning to roll out more information covering civil legal matters. And finally, public service provided by our Hawaii State Bar Association is the Lawyer Referral and Information Service, which will help individuals locate a licensed and actively practicing Hawaii attorney for their legal needs. So now I'm going to send it back to Jenny. And we will talk about your questions.
Yeah, we're super psyched about your questions. Okay, and then also just to reiterate, some of the resources that Marlene was sharing are on that handout, the legal resources at your fingertips, and we're going to deep dive into them next time. So let's do this. There. Oops, sorry, didn't work. Okay, stop share. We practices, I swear. Okay. Paste it. Oh, there. Okay. It's gonna work. What? Okay, hold on a second. Oh wait, now I lost my Zoom. Stop share. All right, I know what I'm gonna do. And okay, but I just want to tell you how excited that we were that we got your questions, and we're really looking forward to it. And we thought, okay, what kind of questions do they have? And some are similar to the ones that we have. And we were really, we were really excited to share with them and to kind of brainstorm how would we answer them. And some of them, I think they aren't that intuitive. So, I really feel grateful that we have the opportunity to share this with you. All right, this is going to work this time. Okay, we're manifesting that it's going to work. Okay. Yes. All right. Okay, so question number 1. I'm homeless, no job, no money, no phone tag from California. I had my papers and ID stolen. So thank you so much for this. Okay, so this houseless person needs to get ID, and I have an answer for you. Legal Aid Society of Hawaii actually has a program targeted very much for this. And actually they go out to Waianae and help folks that are houseless get their state IDs. So you would contact them through their intake line. Neighbor Islands have no phone. So the other thing about that though is that they are starting to roll out in-person intake. And I think in desperate times for desperate measures, they might be able to go down to Bethel Street and get seen. But right now they're not formally taking in-person intakes. But the other thing too is if we can get connected with legal aid. Also, I was inquiring because they work with the homeless shelters too. So if this person, not everybody I realize is in a houseless, like a homeless shelter, but if they're open to it, the outreach coordinators at the homeless shelter also are well versed in this, and you could refer them to them so that they can get them in that HMIS system, but also they facilitate this recovery of their state IDs. Also, they coordinate with legal aid too. So there is an answer. And I think if you're just confronted with this, you're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea. So there is. Refer to legal aid or the homeless shelter outreach coordinators. Oh yeah, so we divvied up these questions and we're really excited. Okay, so number 2. Oh, the passport services, yes. Okay, so I know there's a lot of legal jargon and I wish it was really easy to, I'm gonna try and summarize it in your layman's terms. But families, no 2 families are exactly the same. So that means that no 2 custody or divorce order will be exactly the same. So what I'm going to give you are the keywords. So in a divorce custody or a custody order, there will be, as related to custody, there's physical custody and then there's legal custody. So just a quick and dirty, physical custody is regarding where a child physically resides in the world. Usually it's at one parent's house and then another parent's house, and there'll be a whole paragraph about time sharing or visitation schedule. Legal custody is about, and that's usually joint, but legal custody is about any legal decision that is made for the child or the children, including healthcare, education, and yes, government documents such as passports or driver's permits or driver's licenses. So what you're looking for is the paragraph about legal custody, and you're looking for the word sole. So if they're saying that they have sole legal custody, then you're pretty good to go, except in the small amount of orders, they'll say sole legal custody, but then in some small number of orders, there'll be this tie-breaking authority, whereas they'll say joint legal custody. So then you think, oh no, sorry, you don't qualify. But then there'll be somewhere else in the order where one of the parents has tie-breaking authority. So then you would treat the tie-breaking authority parent as same as sole legal, okay? And then to complicate things, sometimes it'll say sole legal custody except for. So yes, you do have to do a little digging to see that, but what you're really looking for is sole legal custody. And the legal custody is the one that would govern. So if a parent is showing up with your application and then my decree that says, look, I have sole physical custody, that does not pass muster. It's the legal custody. Oh yeah, okay, so look, I'm making it circle. So legal custody. And then another thing to just remember is that you want to make sure, like, again, laws can change over time, orders can change, there can be subsequent orders. So you just have to make sure, or you can say, this is the parent says this is the custody order that's in effect now. All right. So yes, that was a really interesting question. Thanks. Okay. Oh, okay, this is me. So we divvied it up. Okay, usually with renting, leasing laws, I want to know how different the laws are from the mainland can either be used. Okay, so there's a couple questions here. If you're looking for the laws about renting and leasing here in Hawaii, I would recommend the Hawaii Landlord Tenant Handbook, which I did look in your libraries and you all have it, so that's really great. And they could be different. They're probably different because what matters is where you reside. So that's that jurisdiction that we talked about earlier. So it doesn't matter what the laws are from the mainland in this regard. It just matters what's governs here in Hawaii. But then I kind of overthought this and I'm like, well, what if they're just doing research about all the renting and leasing laws? And if that's the case, then you would refer them to the resources Marlene had mentioned, like Fine Law or Legal Information Institute, or they could do kind of like a bird's eye view of their research if they were really going deep diving. But if they're asking you can either be used, it's the Hawaii, I would refer them to the Hawaii Landlord Tenant Handbook and carry on with your life. Okay, legal question number 4. Oh, yes. What did you do? Okay, we get this a lot. Okay, so we help a library patron as much as we can, but they need legal counsel and they're not eligible to utilize legal aid services. So just as a bird's eye view, legal aid is 125% of the poverty line. There is another service on that handy dandy sheet that we passed out, the Volunteer Legal Services of Hawaii. They're a pro bono organization. So they'll see clients that are at 250% of the poverty line. And then there's some other resources there too, like Marlene had mentioned, HOP, the legal, where you can email your question. You do have to qualify for that one. But there's also Legal Line that's on the resource sheet where folks can call on Wednesdays, I think at a particular time, like 5 to 6, I think it is. And they can get legal information from an attorney. On Oahu, they can go to the Access to Justice rooms. And Oahu, Honolulu, and in Kapolei, and they can get limited legal advice for free. In Neighbor Islands, they can go to the self-help centers. So that would be our answer to that question. Oh, okay. These ones are for Marlene, so I'm going to be quiet. I'm just going to be the picture person. I'm going to be the navigator.
So the next 2 questions we received from you were about Hawaiian homelands. And the first part of it was someone who was interested in making sure the property stayed within their family and how they even go about that process. So we would actually refer them to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. And their website is actually really helpful. They do have a section on their website for lessees in particular, and it includes a link to a manual for lessees. There's an application for a lease extension and information on successorship. So that would be actually where we'd say, hey, go there, get your research started, figure out what you need to do. The second part of the question is about affidavits. So we do have sample court forms or affidavits here in our library, and they're in relation to conveyancing and real estate. So we would offer those materials to the patron and then again have them evaluate and determine which of the forms would actually best serve their needs. But really, we really want to emphasize with these kinds of questions that they really should work with DHHL closely. Because they probably have in-house procedures and forms that they need to be following. So next question is back to Jenny, I think. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute myself. Okay. All right, next question. Oh, this was a really interesting one. If a patron at the library threatens to sue for prejudice, what does that mean for me as the branch manager? What steps should I take to protect myself and staff? So believe it or not, we have firsthand experience with similar things. So our advice for you would be, I'm sure you have policies and procedures governing your professional behavior at work. I'm sure HSPLS has tons of those, but for your brand. So our suggestion is just, you're in a pretty good place because you're following your procedures, you're following your professional guidelines. And so if somebody is threatening to sue, remember that they are the ones with the burden of proof of showing that something went wrong. So as long as you are doing your job and following your professional rules, you would be in a pretty good place. Also, documentation is your friend. So document every single incident. So what steps should I take? So your steps: behave professionally, which I'm sure you're doing, document all interactions with this particular individual, have that communication. For us, we had some communication with our security team and our administrative and leadership, really to kind of what are our next steps. So ours actually, in one particular instance, we actually had to talk and get some matters in terms of, we were the ones actually experiencing harassment, and and so we had to take measures about documenting it, actually providing an avenue for the individual to give us feedback. So even as we were saying, you can no longer come on our premises, we actually had a place where we're willing to listen to you. You can write a letter, we'll review it if you don't agree with this decision. And then, our security person actually delivered that letter to them. But I guess the long story short is documentation is your friend. Keep all the communication channels open with your leadership. Another particular situation, Marlene, you remember that one. Actually, that suit got dismissed, but that had nothing to do with us. But we still just had to document everything that we could. So I hope that answers your question. But we were like, oh, we feel you. All right, I'm going to mute. This is Marlene.
Okay, so this question is something that we've talked about previously in the presentation today. So they're asking about assisting someone with filling out an application for Section 8 housing. So like I said before, when it comes to filling out forms, you can assist somebody if it's pointing out to them, this is where you write your name, address, or social security number. As long as there's documentation for the information, it would be okay. So I can imagine with a Section 8 housing application, they're gonna need to include financial information. So if you tell a person to refer to their bank statements or their pay stubs, that's where they can get information to fill out the blanks of the form. But as long as you're following the guidelines we're setting out today, you're going to be perfectly fine in helping somebody if it's a question related to filling out a form. Then our next question, this is a little, this one's a lot. So to address the first part of this question for legal assistance, so they're asking about patrons and referring them to information. So we talk about in this presentation, we refer patrons to the various free or low cost services available online or in person within the community. So there's the self-help centers that we talked about, lawyer referrals and websites. So that would be the first part of the question. And then the next part is, it's always tricky when patrons are asking us, what's the best information you can give me, or what do you recommend? So we do want to caution, we never make referrals to specific individuals, companies, or for-profit services. So we're not going to go and tell a patron, you really need a good divorce attorney, this is who you should go to. We want to avoid that. So that's the HSBA lawyer referral service comes into play. That's where we tell them to go. Or we also have a directory of local attorneys, so they can look at the directory and get contact names and information, and then they can make the calls, screen these individuals, and determine who they may potentially want to hire. And then to address the specific questions in this question, we have something about for rental issues. We do have a landlord-tenant manual specific to Hawaii, so we would refer patrons to that if they had a rental issue. There's also a question about helping someone get an EBT card. So Department of Human Services actually has a lot of information on their website. So we recommend, going there. They do have FAQs as well as providing contact information. And they do have a public assistance information line. So you could refer your patrons to that. And then the next question we have is about an abusive boyfriend and protection from the individual. So this is where they might want to explore the idea of getting a protective order or a temporary restraining order, but it's important to note that there's two different types of TROs you could get here locally in Hawaii. So one is through the family courts, and that's going to be where it's an issue involving a family or household member. And then the other type of TRO would be issued through the district court, and that's going to be an issue where you're not related by blood or you've never lived together. So it would depend on the circumstances of their living situation as well as their relationship. And on our judiciary website, we also have TRO information available in English as well as other languages. So if you do have someone who doesn't speak English as their primary language, it's available in Portuguese, Ilocano, Korean, Khazarian, Marshallese, Japanese, Pohnpeian, Spanish, Tagalog, and Thailand. So we do offer those alternatives. And we find just providing referrals to services within the community and contact information for those services, our patrons are really, really appreciative of that. And so we may not be actually giving them the information they actually need at that point, but just giving them the assurance that, you know, we can refer you on to somebody who can really, really goes a long way. Then our next question is going to be, what constitutes discrimination in Hawaii? So I'm assuming you're asking for a definition of what discrimination in Hawaii is. And that's where you can refer to the Hawaii Revised Statutes, the laws of our state. But the term discrimination in and of itself is really broad. So you may want to clarify with the person, you know, what kind of discrimination are they referring to? Are they talking about employment discrimination? Did it happen in the workplace? Or was it a discrimination in regards to public accommodations? Or did it happen in a restaurant or maybe at a hotel? Or is it in relation to a real estate transaction? You know, they're trying to rent a house, they didn't get it, and they think it was, you know, discrimination based on whatever factor it was. So helping to narrow down the specific type of discrimination, then you can then help them navigate the HRS using the index portion and help them really locate the specific type of information they're looking for. Then the next question, oh, okay, this question. So you've hate speech and hate crime. Okay, so this is more than likely going to be a situation that falls under federal law or the United States Code. But I also want to make a difference or really distinguish between hate speech versus hate crime. So according to the American Library Association website, hate speech is generally protected under the First Amendment. So there are no legal definitions within the United States regarding hate speech or evil ideas, rudeness, or any other kind of speech that people might condemn. So really hate speech boils down to someone just being offensive and hurtful. Whereas on the other hand, hate crimes is defined as by the FBI as an actual criminal offense. So it's a offense against, I'm going to read this because I don't want to get it wrong. It's an offense against a person or property motivated in whole or part by an offender's bias against a race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, ethnicity, gender, or gender identity. So hate crimes are overt acts and can be prosecuted, and they're usually violent acts against other people. So what this all boils down to is people who are spewing hate speech are really just awful people. And those who commit crimes can actually, you know, get punished for their actions. I think it's you, Jenny.
Yeah, sorry. I was all like, yeah, anyway, sorry. Okay, have received questions about rental properties from tenants who are facing eviction, and yes, that I for sure would refer to, I've said it a lot, the Hawaii Landlord Tenant Handbook. That's so helpful. It gives you step-by-step information about things. So we like that. We would suggest that. Also, if they want to seek legal advice, that would be great for the self-help centers or the access to justice room. And then your last question, where'd it go? Oh, this is Marlene, and she had a great answer for you.
So this question, thank you for this question. You're asking just to clarify if what you're doing is on point, and you know, absolutely, you provided the perfect response, and you're absolutely doing what you should be doing. I just want to further clarify though that when somebody's asking about the laws themselves, we do want to make sure we're determining the jurisdiction. You know, are they asking about federal law versus state law versus a county ordinance? Because that makes a huge difference. They might be asking you about a law, and in their minds, they're thinking, oh, it's a Hawaii law. You know, they want a Hawaii Revised Statute, but in reality, it's actually an ordinance, because it may have been an issue where they were cited for loitering in a park, where that would be a county issue, not a state issue. And then from there, once you know what exact law or ordinance that they're looking for, you can actually walk them through the resource, whether it be in hard copy or in a print version. Mhm.
Yay. Okay, so I know we're at time. So we actually had some canned questions, not canned, but questions that we received. But I think I'm just going to go ahead and skip them and then just go to our last slide because we wanted to have time for a Q&A for you guys. Oops. So this is just our friendly reminder slide. You've got this. Evaluate your legal resources. We're here for you. And then the legal resources at your fingertips have great referrals. And we're going to talk about them more in April. And then this is how you can contact us. But we just thought, I'll stop sharing. Oh, wait, should I stop sharing? You can get our info. But I just thought we would open it because we have 4 minutes because we are respectful of your busy time. So if you have any questions, now's the time. We love questions. Did anything come in the chat? Oh,
There's a lot of chat.
Is there a lot of chat?
There's a lot.
Looks like the questions were answered.
Oh, okay. Did you guys, we could do one of our canned questions. Did you want to, I'm not canned, these are legit questions.
These are real questions. We can go back to those.
Why don't we just do one of them, Marlene? Do the one about I'm self-representing myself. So we had one where we're self-representing a probate case and they were trying to download how-to information regarding probate. I don't know, I'm sure you guys might get questions about that because probate, when you're doing probate, if you have a probate case, usually you're not eligible for legal aid. So take it away, Marlene, what would you do?
So with probate, we get a lot of questions about probate. And it's actually a really complicated process when you actually start to go through the manuals that we have here. So what we have available is what we call the Hawaii Probate Source Book, as well as the Hawaii Probate Forms Manual. So these are in hard copy, and they would unfortunately have to come to the library to use these on site. A lot of specific to Hawaii practice manuals are not available online, unfortunately, because they're paid resources that are sold by private entities or publishers. So it's just not made available for free online. So they would have to come to our library to actually access these materials, and we could, show them the information that's available there. And in addition to that, we also have the Hawaii Probate Rules. So that is available for free to anybody with an internet access. They can get it through the judiciary website, or we also have hard copies in our library. So the probate rules will also walk them through the process within the courts. And then there are, I believe, some sample forms at the end. So those are the 3 big resources for probate related questions that we would offer. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
We have them, you may have them too. I didn't have a chance to look at your library, your OPAC. But I answered some questions in the chat. We have 1 minute. Are you sure you don't have any other questions? We love hanging out with librarians. If not, I just really want to encourage you all to take advantage. So we literally just this month expanded our live chat hours to all day. So feel free to chat us.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to?
You don't even have to have a real question. If you just want to test it out, just come in, say hi. Just to use it, just so that you're comfortable with it. And then you can say, hey, there's this wonderful service at the Supreme Court. Go chat them.
Yes, exactly. Do it. We would love it. We'll be like, oh, I'll let the staff know. Appreciate you. All right.
Wow. Okay, well, I don't think there are any other questions. So thank you to Jenny and Marlene for the wonderful presentation. And thank you everyone for joining us.
Mahalo for having us.
Yay, thank you. Thank you. Woo!
You did it. Hooray.
See you guys. Woohoo. Okay then. Hey, best video.